Hello to you all. It's a true pleasure and indeed an honor to have you join me back here in our old stomping grounds, or burial grounds, as is so often the case. Today's offering is quite in keeping with our motif of the monstrous and our normal thematic template of terror. It all unfolds in the Arctic Circle in the year 2032. And for future audiences, that's a decade from where we sit at this point in space and time. And for you, I can only hope that what you're about to hear never comes true. This little flight of whimsy, ladies and gentlemen, is called The Visitor. And I advise that when he comes knocking, that you don't let him, or more correctly, it, in. Because it's only recently escaped the confines of the Nightfall Radio Show. The capsule was partially buried in the ice when Roger Barrister picked it up on his visoscope. He checked and rechecked the sensor array for malfunctions that might account for the strange readings, and even recalibrated his console. But the readings came through loud and clear. Cylindrical object, 3 meters, composite, high-density steel, boraxium, and an unidentifiable alloy. Spencer Corp, one of the world's leading research firms, had bankrolled the entire project, and they were looking for results, any kind. Biological research stations had been a profitable venture since 1998, particularly for companies in the United States and in Europe. And now it seemed as if all the top dogs from Washington, London, Rome, New York, and Tokyo were scurrying like rabid cave trolls to establish the latest and most technologically equipped research outpost. Now Roger Barrister of the Royal Academy of Sciences was forced into making his first real command decision since his heady days in Central Africa. Either he would wake Doc and York and tell them about what he discovered, or he'd go out alone. He decided on the former and woke them up. The 3 men got into their thermal outwear, which included exothermal parkas and boots, sub-zero tempered goggles with bino extensions, and gloves with a 1/4 inch of insulation. Each man was wearing standard issue service revolvers with 60 rounds each and spare cartridges clipped to their belts. As they made their way outside the compound, their palm scope sensors locked in on the object, 1 kilometer to the west. Their readings proved accurate and they located the capsule with little trouble. Barrister scanned the object for radiation. No sign of radiocontaminants, said Barrister. Scanning for viral and bacterial contaminants, said Dr. Nathan Richards. He ran his metascope across the object and returned it to his pouch. Negative, he said. Okay, let's get this big son of a bitch out of the ice, said Maxwell York. And their Bunsen torches took down 1.5 meters of solid ice in less than 5 minutes. They lowered the capsule down onto the portable anti-gravity platform and headed back to the compound. When they got back, Meteorological Central was radioing in to report an approaching storm. Barrister adjusted the receiver for optimum reception. He then hit the responder switch. M Central, this is S Eagle Outpost. We have received the transmission. Looks like it'll be rough going for a couple of days with the storm coming, said Dr. Richards. We can crack that thing open in the morning, but now, let's get some sleep. And they did sleep soundly that night. Too soundly, I fear. You see, the capsule that the men found should have been left out there in the cold, desolate waste, for it wasn't empty. In fact, the 3 men had unwittingly provided the occupant of the capsule for the opportunity that it had been waiting for about 50,000 years. Once out of the capsule, the visitor found the area where the men were sleeping. and fashioned a huge silk web in the outer corridor. York was the first to be cocooned, then the doctor. Unfortunately, Barrister was somehow roused to consciousness and was audience to his own demise. The first and last images that filled his eyes were flashes of gruesome multiple sets of gray, hairy legs and a pair of gleaming black fangs. 3 days passed. The storm subsided, and the supply chopper was able to land with another 6 months of food, clothing, computer equipment, books, etc. Quartermaster Chin was surprised when no one met him at the landing pier. Outpost teams were usually chomping at the bit for even the slightest contact with the outside world. He punched in his security code and entered the outer chamber of the compound. When he came to the inner door, he paused for an instant. How could anyone do 18 months straight in this mausoleum, he thought to himself. He keyed in his access code, and the inner door slid open. The doctor was standing there to greet him. "Hi, Doc," he said. "Why, Mr. Chin, we're so very glad to see you." "We thought you'd never get here," said the doctor. From directly behind, Chin heard the sound of shuffling feet. He turned and saw Barrister and York smiling at him. And he saw something else. Protruding from the circumference of each of their abdomens were 6 spindly, hairy gray limbs, each tipped with small, shiny, sharp black talons. Then he saw their eyes, now glossed over, grotesquely enlarged, and completely black. He thought about screaming, but it seemed pointless. And in reality it was. He simply stood there looking at them. And when the web came down on him from above, he closed his eyes.